This is Renewing Faith Radio with Pastor Jason Gold of Regeneration Calvary Chapel in Sandpoint, Idaho.
In your presence, darkness hides.
We deserve hell, but by His grace and His mercy, He calls us His own. It's His grace and it's mercy. And so, they're about 1 month out from this incredible miracle of crossing the Red Sea. And they start with praising God, and then they start going through a trial, and they start complaining.
On the cross it was done.
Have you received a great blessing from God? And yet, a short time later, when things got hard again, you quickly forgot His goodness? The Lord is always with you and always provides for you. But sometimes it's hard to remember that when difficult times return. Today, Pastor Jason discusses how the Israelites quickly forgot how God had miraculously saved them at the Red Sea and began to doubt whether He would provide for them again. Perhaps that's where you're at. But take heart, He will provide. Now turn in your Bible to the book of Exodus chapter 16, as Pastor Jason begins his message, God's Provision.
One thing I long for, I will seek.
Exodus chapter 16, and we've been following the children of Israel. They've come out of Egypt. The Lord parted the Red Sea, and then they're on the other side, and they're thirsty. They're complaining about being thirsty, and then they come upon a place called Marah, which is Marah being bitter. And so what ends up happening is they're complaining, and then Moses gets the complaint, and Moses goes to the Lord, and the Lord tells Moses, hey, throw this tree into this bitter water, and the Lord turns it to sweetness. And, when we think about our trials, we think about things that we go through. We're going to go through bitter times, we're going to go through refreshing times, and the Lord remains faithful in all of it. But oftentimes when we're going through the bitter times, it's hard for us to see on the other side. It's hard to see how God's going to get us through it. It's hard to see how God's going to minister in such a way, because we might go through a really bitter situation, something that there's no pleasure in it at all. For me personally, I find no pleasure in a lemon wedge. I don't. I can't stand bitter. I can't stand sour. And some people just love lemon. And, when life throws you a lemon, what do you make? Lemonade. And so sometimes we just have to find the sweetness in the bitterness, because God always sees us through whatever it is that we're going through, if we depend on Him, if we look to Him. Because in this life, we are passing through. This is not our permanent place. And it's so important that we approach life as sojourners. Because if we do, then our approach on life is none of this is super valuable. None of this is worth holding on to. And we are literally passing through. Life is short. And 1 Peter 2:11 says, Beloved, I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by your good works which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. So this is saying, look, you are passing through, you have your old flesh, abstain from giving into those old things, those lusts, and if somebody comes against you and they give you some false accusation, let your actions show that whatever they're saying isn't true. You live out your life. There's an old saying, people with integrity expect to be believed, and when they're not, they let time prove them right. It's so important that we realize that God is our defense, that we aren't to defend ourselves. Because when we do, what do? We look guilty. You ask your kids, hey, where were you last night? And depending on the tone in which you ask, They might have just been outside talking to somebody and praying with somebody on the phone. But yet, if you ask them in an accusatory fashion, what's the natural thing is to get defensive. And so we're usually better off not defending ourselves, as it says here, that by your good works, by the things that you do. It's not the things that you say. It's the things that you do that may glorify God. Hebrews 11:13 says, these all died in faith, so not having received the promises. All right, so this is the hall of faith. This is like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it says here, these all died in faith, not having received the promises. So that's kind of a Debbie Downer. But if you read on, it says, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. In other words, what they were doing is they kept their eyes on the prize, and whether or not they were going to be the ones that actually saw it fulfilled, that part didn't matter. They had their eyes fixed on it. Some people can get discouraged when they read this verse because God gives us promises. He might have given you a word of knowledge that something, because of your life, there's going to be something that takes place that is good, that God wants to do, but yet you may never see it. It may be a fruit of your life, and what if it's not for 2 more generations? But it's because you sowed a seed. You see, we don't always see what God is going to do. We don't always see the fruit. And so here we see the forefathers, they were assured of these promises. They were assured of them. They embraced them. They confessed them. And so just because it's not happening on your timetable doesn't mean that you lose faith. That's so important. I think of it as a relay race. You have the person that starts the race, then you got 2 people in between, and then you have the anchor, you have the finisher. Both are part of the same race. One starts it. There are some people that continue it, and there are some people that finish it. But it's all the same race. And we can't lose heart when we are in a race, knowing that it's for his kingdom, it's for his purposes. And so whether or not we see certain things fulfilled on this side, that part really shouldn't be the anchor of our soul, our dependence upon results, because our relationship with the Lord should not be dependent upon results, but yet dependent upon obedience. Because when we walk in obedience and we do what is right, then we can lay down our head at night thinking and praying, saying, thank you, Lord, I did everything that I could to further your kingdom. Whether or not you see the results or not, that shouldn't be our driving force. And so when we look at what is taking place, the children of Israel, they've gone definitely through a really difficult time. They were slaves under Egypt. And then, for about a year, literally for about a year, God pours out these plagues and he's judging them. And in one day, he gets the Israelites out of Egypt. And then for the next 40 years, he's trying to get Egypt out of the Israelites because they're so used to it. They've lost sight of what God has promised them. They've lost sight of their leg of the race. Hebrews 12:1 says, therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. You realize Jesus did not want to go to the cross. He said, if there be any other way, let this cup pass. He was sweating drops of blood because he didn't want to go to the cross. He was so stressed out about it. You could imagine the anguish, the idea of being separated from the Father for you, for me. his unconditional love. He was willing to lay it all down. And he's our example. He is our example of laying down our life, that we would finish our race. When we think about, there's the anchor in a race, there's the anchor on a boat. The anchor in a race finishes the race. The anchor in a boat keeps the boat from getting caught up and bashing up against the rocks or whatever. An anchor of a boat protects the boat and keeps it where it's supposed to be in the midst of a storm. And even in calm waters, the anchor keeps the boat from drifting from where it shouldn't be. And also in a race, there's an anchor. There's the finisher. In Hebrews 6:19, it says, "This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which enters the presence behind the veil." You see, the anchor of our soul should be Jesus Christ and him alone, none other. But yet we can put our trust in this government or the next government. The children of Israel, the Lord has seen them through a lot, and they come from out of Morah, which is the bitter place. Then they come to this place called Elam, which has a bunch of palm trees and plenty of water. And so they enter into this time of refreshing. And isn't it nice when we enter into a time of refreshing? When we come out of a trial and we're just kind of like, okay, we got through that one. But isn't God faithful to not keep us in the time of refreshing? Because oftentimes, if he kept us in the time of refreshing, what we would do is we would forget that the time of refreshing is from the Lord, and then we would start thinking of how we created the time of refreshing. It's just our human nature. It's what we do. We grab onto the things that God has done, and we start to take credit for it. It's in our nature. It's what we do. But here, it's so important that we don't get our eyes off the Lord, because the children of Israel, they got their eyes off the Lord, and we're going to see they start to complain relatively quick. So here in chapter 16, verse 1, it says, "And they journeyed from Elam, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elam and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they departed from the land of Egypt." Now, this wilderness of sin is not what you and I would think of as far as it's a wilderness of debauchery. No, sin, most of the commentators and the scholars agree that it is the wilderness of Sinai. So it's an abbreviation of Sinai, the wilderness of sin. And so it's in between Elam and Sinai. And so it goes on to say that on the 15th day of the second month, after they departed from the land of Egypt. So it's just over a month from Passover. So you think of the plague that came through and killed all the firstborn. And so those that had the blood on the post and the lintel, they were saved. So they saw that miracle. And then they flee out of Egypt. They go across the Red Sea. And so it's about 45 days or so from them fleeing out of Egypt. And if you want to read more as far as connecting the dots of their journey, if you read Numbers 33, it starts at verse 9, gives you more information. But, so they've gone about 300 miles, and you can imagine they're tired. And so verse 2, it says, "Then the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness." So you could just imagine Moses and Aaron just saying like, okay, here we go again. These people just keep complaining. And so this is verse 3, it tells us what they said. It says, "Children of Israel said to them, 'Oh, that we had died.'" I mean, listen to this. "Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat and when we ate bread in the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Now, I'm going to read it in the NLT version. Exodus 16:3, it says, "If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt," they moaned. "There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But you have brought us into the wilderness to starve us all to death." Wah. They are just, I mean, you could imagine, it's like Job's wife. You guys should just curse God and die. You just led us to the slaughter to starve. And so you can imagine, it's estimated 2 to 3 million people. 2 to 3 million people, but it says here that the whole congregation, all of them are complaining. Can you imagine, like if we all started to complain, it'd be irritating. Imagine 2 million people complaining. How irritating that would be. Any of you that have 2 or more kids and they start complaining in their high-pitched voice, it's just like, ugh. Anybody relate? No? And so they're saying, I would rather die with my stomach full of meat than to take these steps of faith and maybe miss a meal. This is how conditioned they were. They were so, you can imagine, I mean, they were slaves and on the Egyptian welfare system. They were told what to do and they were provided their meals, but it was a hard life. But they couldn't handle the freedom because freedom meant you had to work, you had to figure things out, and they didn't want to figure things out. And so you can imagine, the complaining started with one person. That's usually how it starts. And then that one person turns into 2 people. And then it turns into 3 people. And next thing you know, it's 2 million people complaining. And so, needless to say, the Lord has told us not to be like this. In Philippians 2:14, it says, do all things without complaining and disputing. What does that mean? It means do all things without complaining and disputing. So whatever you're going through, whatever God has you going through, we are not to complain about it. Easier said than done. 1 Peter 4:9 says, be hospitable to one another without grumbling. That means be nice to people without grumbling. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. If anyone speaks, let him speak as the oracles of God. If anyone ministers, let him do it as with the ability which God supplies. You've heard the cliche or the phrase that, God's calling is his enabling. And here it is. If anyone ministers, let him do it as with the ability which God supplies. We don't do anything in our own strength because if we do, it stinks. It's of the flesh. Because it says, if we do it under the ability that God supplies, that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory and the dominion forever and ever. So this means be hospitable. This means be nice. Be nice to people without grumbling. You don't complain. And so here the children of Israel, they're having selective memory. They're forgetting what God had done. And so they get on the complaining wagon. And so you still have the plowed by day, fire by night leading them. And yet they're just forgetting about it. And so they're getting used to God's provision. And how easy it is that we get used to the things. We get used to the blessings. And then what we do is we focus on the blessing rather than the blesser. We just get entitled now, and we start to think, I deserve to be blessed. No, we deserve to be burned. We deserve hell. But by his grace and his mercy, he calls us his own. It's his grace and its mercy. And so they're about 1 month out from this incredible miracle of crossing the Red Sea. And they start with praising God, and then they start going through a trial, and they start complaining. Remember, the last chapter, chapter 15, was a song that Moses wrote, and they're all singing that song. And now they're on the complaining wagon. And so we need to understand that God is always working in us. That's so important because if it's God working in us, then it's going to be God working through us. If it's us being a self-preserved, a man-made man or a woman-made woman, and you're just a person that, you're guarded, you don't let anybody get to know you, and it's all about Christianese, right? We all know about Christianese. Oh, brother, are you washed in the blood? And, all these phrases that are great to hear. But what if it's, how was your week? Oh, it was something I would say to our kids. I'd say, how are you doing? And they say, good. And then I would say, deep down. And as soon as I say deep down, they know what I'm asking. I want to know more of what's going on in the heart. And so we need to do this with one another because it will alleviate us complaining because we're able to get counsel through a hard time. We all go through difficult times, and so we need to understand that God is always working. And so in verse 4, we're going to see how the Lord responds. It says, then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. All the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. Okay, so here we see they're in this trial. They're not having the food that they want, but God is saying, I'm going to provide, but in my provision, there's a testing. There's life lessons all through this. And it's all about whether or not they will walk in my law or not, whether or not we will walk in obedience, regardless of the situation. Imagine if we could walk in such a way that I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter what's going around me. I know God's going to take care of me. Settled, done. If our faith was to that point where if the storm was coming, it just never shook us. If all of a sudden we dealing with some major health issue, it never shook us. Some financial crisis, it never shook us. Some emotional pain, it never shakes us. A spouse leaving another spouse is our trust in the Lord. I understand this is all like idealistic, but this is what the Lord is saying here, is that in the midst of his provision, there's going to be a testing to see if there's going to be obedience. And so this is the Lord, because it says here that he's going to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I might test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. This is not the Lord testing them for him. This is the Lord testing them for them. God already knows how it's all going to work out. This is so that they would grow. And so God, he takes some time to get them out of Egypt, and they're going back to the good old days. Oh, remember when we had meat? Remember when we had chicken? Remember when we had the bones of a rack of lamb? Chances are they didn't get it, but they probably got the leftovers. And so now the Lord is going to take them through this process of learning. There's a whole new set of rules. Egypt always represents sin. And so in our lives, we have our before Christ days, there are days of sin, and we come to the Lord, we're a new creation, so now there's a new set of rules. And we can't live the way that we used to. God doesn't let us get away with it. He's faithful. And you can't sin the way you used to because you feel guilty, you feel convicted.
You've been listening to the latest edition of Renewing Faith Radio, where Pastor Jason is in the exciting book of Exodus. Sometimes you might wonder why God goes about things the way he does, but he has a purpose and a plan, always. Have you ever thought about the fact that God gave the Canaanite nations 400 years to repent of their wicked ways before the Israelites would come and reside in that land? What resulted in oppression for the Israelites in Egypt coincided with God's mercy being extended toward the Canaanite nations at that time. But when the time was right, and those foreign nations had not repented, God allowed his chosen people to leave Egypt and take possession of that land. Never underestimate God's reasons for what he does. He's purposeful, and it's all to bring things about for His glory. Can you think of situations where you're perplexed about what God's doing? You might be experiencing hurt from other church members. You might have lost a job unexpectedly. Your social circle may have been turned upside down. But think about this. What if God is turning the hard things around and bringing about good for you in it? Just like the Israelites, He has a plan for you. If you need or want to listen to this message again, you can find it at renewingfaithradio.com. To learn more about the church this ministry comes from, go to our website and find out service times, what we believe, and more about Pastor Jason. That's all for today, but we're looking forward to looking into Exodus again, right here on Renewing Faith Radio.